For 50 years, Padre Pio of Pietrelcina awakened every day at 3 a.m., always at the same hour, always with the same prayer on his lips, a prayer he never taught publicly, a prayer the Vatican kept archived in secret documents until 1998. And when they finally revealed its contents, it became clear why it had been kept silent for so long. Because it wasn't just any prayer, it was a spiritual weapon, so powerful, it could be dangerous in the wrong hands. Have you ever woken up at 3 a.m. for no apparent reason, your heart racing, with an inexplicable sense of dread, with the certainty that something is wrong, but without knowing what? This isn't coincidence, and it isn't insomnia. It's spiritual warfare, and in the next 20 minutes, you're going to discover exactly what's happening in the invisible world at this specific hour. Why 3 a.m. is called the Devil's Hour. What Padre Pio knew about this moment that you don't. And most importantly, the complete prayer he recited to confront what came at that hour. But before revealing the prayer, you need to understand why the Vatican hid this for decades. Why the Capuchin friars who lived with Padre Pio were ordered never to mention what happened at 3 a.m. in his cell, and what changed in 1998 that made them finally release this information to the public. The story begins in 1918. Padre Pio had just received the stigmata, the 5 holy wounds of Christ, open on his body, and along with the stigmata came the attacks, spiritual attacks of an intensity that few saints in the history of the Church have experienced. The devil appeared physically to him. He beat him, threw objects, smashed furniture, scratched, bit, and screamed horrific blasphemies all night long. The friars who slept in the cells next door heard everything, the noise, the screams, the sound of furniture being thrown. And in the morning, when they entered Padre Pio's cell, they found him wounded, with bite marks, with deep scratches, with his clothes torn, and the cell completely destroyed. But Padre Pio never complained, never asked for the attacks to stop, because he understood that this was direct spiritual combat, that the devil was attacking him because he was afraid of him, because he knew that Padre Pio was a real threat to the kingdom of darkness. And it was during one of these particularly violent attacks that Padre Pio discovered something. He noticed a pattern. The attacks always intensified at 3 a.m., always at that exact hour, as if there were a spiritual gate that opened, as if at that specific moment the invisible world became more accessible and the demonic forces had more power to act in the physical world. Padre Pio began to study this. He spoke with exorcist priests, read ancient treatises on spiritual warfare, and discovered that it wasn't a coincidence that 3 a.m. has a specific spiritual significance, because Jesus Christ died at 3 p.m., and 3 a.m. is exactly the opposite. It's the anti-hour, the moment when the devil mocks the death of Christ, the moment when he tries to exert more power over the world. In the ancient exorcism treatises, 3 a.m. is mentioned repeatedly. It's the hour when possessions manifest more strongly. It's the hour when objects are moved by invisible forces. It's the hour when spiritually sensitive people wake up with a feeling of terror without explanation. And it's the hour when the veil between the physical world and the spiritual world becomes thinner, allowing both angels and demons to interact more easily with humans. Padre Pio decided that if 3 a.m. was the hour of greatest demonic attack, then it would also be the hour of his greatest spiritual response. If the devil chose that moment to mock, he would choose that moment to worship. If the darkness tried to dominate that hour, he would consecrate it to the light. And that's how the ritual was born. Every day, without exception, for 50 years. Padre Pio woke up at 3 a.m. to pray. But it wasn't a common prayer. It wasn't the rosary. It wasn't the liturgy of the hours. It was something different. A prayer that he had composed specifically for that moment. A prayer that combined adoration of Christ, invocation of the angels, renunciation of the devil, and consecration of the hour. And the results were immediate and documented. Brother Albert d'Appolito, who was the guardian of the convent at that time, documented everything in his diary. He wrote that after Padre Pio began to recite that specific prayer at 3 a.m., the attacks changed in nature. They didn't stop completely, but they became less violent, and more importantly, they began to have less power over Padre Pio, as if the prayer created a spiritual shield that the devil couldn't penetrate completely. Brother Albert tried to ask Padre Pio what the prayer was. He wanted to learn it. He wanted to pray along. But Padre Pio refused to teach it. He said that that prayer wasn't for everyone, that it required specific spiritual preparation, that recited by a person in a state of mortal sin, or without true consecration to God, it could attract worse attacks, and that therefore he would keep that between himself and God. The other friars respected the silence, but they continued to observe, because it was impossible not to notice. Every morning, at 3 o'clock sharp, the light in Padre Pio's cell came on, and it stayed on for exactly 1 hour. And during that hour, the entire convent was in deep peace, as if an invisible barrier protected everyone while Padre Pio prayed. The friars began to call that the hour of protection, and many of them adjusted their own sleep to wake up a little before 3, just to witness that supernatural peace that descended upon San Giovanni Rotondo when Padre Pio began to pray. But in 1963, the Vatican found out. A visiting cardinal spent a night at the convent and woke up at 3 a.m. He felt the peace, saw the light in Padre Pio's cell, and was intrigued. He asked the friars what was happening, and they naively told him everything about the prayer, about the ritual, about the 50 years of fidelity to that specific moment. The cardinal reported it to Rome, and Rome became concerned, not because they thought Padre Pio was doing anything wrong, but because they were afraid of what might happen if that practice spread. If millions of Catholics began to wake up at 3 a.m. to recite that prayer without adequate preparation, if people in grave sin tried to use that as magic, if the prayer fell into the hands of occult practitioners who could distort it, so they made a decision. They ordered Padre Pio to continue praying. They didn't want to interrupt something that clearly had spiritual power, but they ordered absolute silence. No friar could mention the prayer, no visitor could be told, and when Padre Pio of Pietrelcina passed away, the prayer would be archived in the Vatican's secret documents, along with other spiritual practices. Deemed too dangerous for general public use, Padre Pio obeyed. He never spoke of the prayer again, but he never stopped praying it. Not until the very last week of his life, even when he was so weak, he could barely get out of bed, even when the pain from the 5 holy wounds of Christ was unbearable. Every day, at 3 a.m., he would wake up, turn on the light, and pray, like a soldier who never abandons his post, like a guardian who knows his vigilance protects more than just himself. And when Padre Pio died in 1968, the prayer was immediately sealed, placed in a sealed envelope, archived within the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, and marked as unavailable for public viewing. Only theologians with special permission could access it, and even then, they were forbidden from copying or divulging its contents. For 30 years, it remained that way, buried in the archives, forgotten by almost everyone, until 1998, when something changed. Pope John Paul II was reviewing old documents related to Padre Pio because the canonization process was moving forward, and he read the prayer, studied the context, consulted with theologians, and made a surprising decision. He said that the world had changed, that spiritual warfare had intensified, that Catholic families were being torn apart by forces they didn't understand, and that maybe it was time to give people access to more powerful spiritual weapons, even with the risks, because the risk of leaving people defenseless was greater than the risk of teaching the prayer. So, in November of 1998, the prayer was officially released, published in an internal bulletin of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, made available to bishops who could decide whether or not to teach it in their dioceses. And slowly, in the years that followed, it began to circulate among Catholic communities around the world. But even today, few know it because it wasn't widely promoted, it wasn't placed in popular prayer books, and many priests still hesitate to teach it because they know its history. They know it's a powerful prayer, and a powerful prayer demands responsibility. It cannot be treated like magic. It cannot be prayed mechanically. It has to be prayed with a pure heart, with an active sacramental life, with true consecration to God. So, before I reveal the complete prayer, you need to understand the conditions. Padre Pio established 3 absolute rules that were documented by Brother Albert di Appolito, and the Vatican maintained these rules when they released the prayer. These aren't suggestions, they are mandatory conditions, because violating these conditions not only nullifies the power of the prayer, but it can open you up to worse attacks. The first condition is a state of grace. You cannot pray this prayer while in a state of mortal sin. You have to be confessed with a clean soul. Because when you invoke the power of God against the devil while you're in a state of serious sin, you are lying. You're saying you belong to God while your actions say otherwise. And the devil will expose that contradiction in a violent way. The second condition is an active sacramental life. It's not enough to be confessed once. You need to be living a true Catholic life, regular Mass, frequent communion, daily prayer, because this prayer isn't a shield you put on when you want. It's a consequence of a lifetime oriented toward God. Padre Pio could pray that prayer with power because he lived what he prayed. He fasted. He spent hours in prayer. He suffered for the sins of the world. The prayer was an extension of his life, not a separate magic trick. And the third condition is a willingness to suffer. This scares people, but it's true. When you place yourself as a direct opponent of the devil, through this prayer, you are becoming a target. Padre Pio knew this. The attacks didn't stop when he started praying. They changed in nature, yes, but they continued, and sometimes they even intensified, because the devil hates those who confront him. So, you need to be willing to carry your cross, to suffer persecution, to be misunderstood, to go through dark nights of the soul, because that is the reality of true spiritual warfare. If you don't meet these 3 conditions, I'm going to ask you not to pray this prayer yet. Work on your spiritual life first. Go to confession, return to the sacraments, strengthen your relationship with God. And when you are ready, when these 3 conditions are a reality in your life, then you can use this spiritual weapon. But if you do meet the conditions, if you're in a state of grace, if you live an active sacramental life, if you're willing to suffer for the love of Christ, then this prayer can transform not only your early mornings, but your entire spiritual life. Because what Padre Pio discovered is that consecrating 3 a.m. doesn't just protect that hour, it protects the whole day. It creates a spiritual shield that lasts 24 hours. As if you were saying to the devil, If you want to attack me, in the hour of your greatest power, I'm going to confront you right there and show you that the power of God is infinitely greater than yours, even in your strongest moment. The prayer has three parts. The first part is adoration. The second is renunciation. The third is consecration. And you pray the three parts in that specific order, because the order matters. You can't reverse it. You can't skip it. It has to be exactly as Padre Pio taught. The first part, the adoration, begins like this. At 3 a.m., you wake up, get out of bed, kneel on the floor if possible. If you can't kneel because of a physical problem, sit in a reverent posture. But the ideal is to kneel, because this hour demands a posture of extreme humility. Before God, you make the sign of the cross and begin, Jesus Christ, Son of the living God, I adore you. In this hour, when the devil tries to mock your death, you died at 3 p.m. to save us, and I consecrate to you the hour of 3 a.m. to adore you. Because if hell chooses this hour to curse, I choose this hour to bless. If the kingdom of darkness tries to dominate this moment, I surrender it to your light. You pause, breathe, let those words penetrate deeply. It's not to be prayed in a rush. It's to feel each phrase, each declaration, because you are literally redesignating that moment, taking it out of the hands of the kingdom of darkness and placing it in the hands of Christ. Then continue the adoration. Jesus, I recognize that you are Lord of every hour, that there isn't a moment that escapes your dominion, that not even the darkest hour of the night is beyond the reach of your grace, and I declare that this hour, now and forever, belongs to you. Amen. This first part usually takes about 3 minutes. Padre Pio sometimes stayed longer. It depended on how intense the spiritual presence was that day, but the basic structure is this: adoration that establishes who the true owner of that hour is. That makes it clear to the entire invisible world that you are not there out of fear. You're not there running away. You are there adoring, and genuine adoration is a weapon the devil has no defense against. The second part of the prayer is renunciation, and this part is more confronting. Because it's not a passive prayer, it's a declaration of spiritual warfare. It's you saying directly to the devil, I reject you, I do not fear you, and you have no power here. Renunciation begins like this. Satan, I renounce you. I renounce you and all your works. I renounce every influence you try to exert over me in this hour. I am not yours. I never was yours, and I never will be yours. I belong to Jesus Christ, who defeated you on the cross and will always defeat you. Withdraw. You have no authority over my life. You have no access to my home. You have no power over my family. In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you, withdraw. Padre Pio taught that this part has to be prayed with authority, not with fear, not with doubt, with absolute certainty that you are on the winning side, because the devil has already been defeated. The cross has already guaranteed the victory. You are not fighting for victory. You are declaring a victory that has already been won. And here, there's an important detail that Brother Albert D'Appolito documented. After this second part of the prayer, it's common to feel a spiritual reaction. It might be a sudden fear. It might be the urge to stop. It might be a strange noise in the house. It might be a feeling of presence. This means that the prayer is working, that you've touched something real. And the temptation will be to stop, but you don't stop. You continue to the third part, because the third part is the seal of protection. The third part is consecration. And this is the most powerful of the three, because it's not enough to cast out evil. You have to fill the empty space with good. If you only expel but don't consecrate, the devil comes back. Jesus himself taught this. When the unclean spirit leaves and finds the house empty, he returns with 7 worse than himself. Consecration works like this. Sacred Heart of Jesus, I consecrate to you this hour. I consecrate this early morning hour. I consecrate my sleep. I consecrate my home while I sleep. I consecrate my family. May your precious blood cover us. May your light penetrate every room. May your angels stand guard. And may no evil find entrance while we rest under your protection. You pray this slowly, with faith. And then you add the invocation of the angels. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly hosts, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. And finally, you end with consecration to Mary. Mary, Mother of God and our Mother, I consecrate myself to your immaculate heart in this hour. Cover me with your mantle, protect me from evil, and intercede for me with your Son. May I sleep in peace under your maternal protection. Amen. The complete prayer takes between 15 and 20 minutes to pray properly. Padre Pio sometimes stayed for an entire hour, but the minimum is 15 minutes. Because less than that, you're rushing. And a rushed prayer has no power. It has to be deliberate. Conscious, felt, every word matters. Every declaration creates a spiritual reality. After praying, Padre Pio remained in silence for a few more minutes, just listening, just feeling the presence of God, and then he went back to bed. But he didn't fall asleep immediately. He lay there in peace, knowing that he had fulfilled his spiritual duty, that he had faced the darkest hour with adoration, and that protection was established. The documented results of this practice are impressive. Brother Modestino, another Capuchin friar who lived with Padre Pio, wrote in letters that after they started waking up also at 3 a.m. to pray together in the chapel while Padre Pio prayed in his cell, the entire convent changed. Fewer conflicts among the friars, fewer illnesses, fewer spiritual attacks. As if Padre Pio's prayer created a field of protection that covered everyone. And when the prayer was released in 1998, communities that adopted the practice reported similar changes. A parish in Chicago implemented a 3 a.m. vigil. Volunteers took turns to ensure that there was always someone in the church praying Padre Pio's prayer at that hour. And in 6 months, the cases of possession and demonic oppression in the parish dropped dramatically. The exorcist priest of the diocese documented this. He said it was as if an invisible shield had been erected over that community. A family in New York started praying the prayer together. Everyone woke up at 3 a.m., parents and 3 teenage children, and they reported that the nightmares that had tormented the children stopped completely, that the atmosphere of the house changed, that arguments lessened, and that everyone began to feel a peace they hadn't felt before. But there are also cases of people who tried to pray without fulfilling the conditions, and the results were the opposite. A man in Los Angeles who was living in adultery tried to pray the prayer at 3 a.m. On the second day, he had such a severe panic attack at that hour that he needed to go to the hospital, and he continued to have attacks every time at 3 a.m. until he sought out a priest, confessed his sins, regularized his marital situation, and only then was he able to pray the prayer in peace. This is not to scare you. It's to make it clear that spiritual warfare is real. It's not a game. It's not superstition, and it cannot be treated lightly. Padre Pio took 50 years to perfect this practice. 50 years of discipline, of suffering, of absolute faithfulness. And even then, he never said he had mastered it. He always considered himself a soldier following orders, always dependent on the grace of God, never confident in himself. If you are watching this video and have identified that you need this prayer, that your home is under attack at 3 a.m., that you wake up at that hour with inexplicable fear, that you feel an evil presence at that moment, then this knowledge has reached you through the intercession of Padre Pio. It wasn't coincidence. It was providence. But you need to prepare. Don't try to pray tomorrow if you are not in a state of grace. First confess. First regularize your life. First establish a prayer routine. And when you are ready, when the 3 conditions are fulfilled, then you can begin. And if this revelation about Padre Pio's secret prayer has opened your eyes to the reality of the spiritual battle that happens every day at 3 a.m., if you understood why you wake up at that hour with fear, if you finally have an explanation for that inexplicable oppression, then the super thanks down below isn't just financial support. It's a spiritual offering, a declaration that you recognize and embrace the path to spiritual empowerment that Padre Pio has shown us. You're saying that this kind of profound Catholic knowledge, this kind of true spiritual weapon, needs to keep being revealed to families who are suffering attacks without knowing how to defend themselves, because videos like this are rare. Most Catholic channels talk about superficial things, generic devotions, beautiful prayers, but without real power. But this channel commits to bringing what few have the courage to teach. The spiritual weapons that really work, the practices that saints actually used, the methods documented and approved by the Church, but hidden in archives. And when you click that golden heart, you are becoming a guardian of this knowledge. You're becoming part of who keeps these truths accessible. So if this has changed your understanding of spiritual warfare, show it now. Be part of the resistance. But there's a practical side that you need to know if you're going to start praying this prayer, how to implement this without destroying your sleep, how to create a sustainable routine, how to prepare your family, if you live with other people, because it's no use starting excited and giving up in the first week. Padre Pio did this for 50 years because he had a method, and you need the method too. First practical thing, adjust your sleep. If you're going to wake up at 3 a.m. every day, you need to sleep earlier. Padre Pio went to bed at 8 p.m., 7 hours of sleep before waking up at 3 a.m., so he wasn't depriving himself of necessary rest. He was just reorganizing his schedule. You probably can't sleep at 8, but you can try 9 or 10. And going to bed before midnight already changes everything, because that way you have at least 5 hours of sleep before 3 a.m. Second practical thing, prepare the environment. Leave a glass of water next to the bed. Have appropriate clothes so you don't feel cold when you get up. If you're going to kneel, put a mat or pillow on the floor the night before. Everything that eliminates friction helps you not to give up. When the alarm clock rings, because at 3 a.m., your body will resist. It will want to continue sleeping, and if you have to look for things, prepare the environment. It will be easier to go back to bed, too. Third practical thing, use a gentle but effective alarm clock. Don't use a shrill alarm that will scare you and wake up the whole house. But also don't use something so gentle that you'll ignore it. Padre Pio had such great discipline that he woke up naturally at 3, but he trained that for years. You, in the beginning, will need help. So put the alarm clock on the other side of the room. This forces you to get up to turn it off. And once you've gotten up, it's easier not to go back to bed. Fourth practical thing, If you live with other people, warn them beforehand. Explain what you're going to do. Ask for understanding, for the light you're going to turn on, for the movement. Ideally, do it in a separate room where you won't bother them. But if you have no choice, be respectful. Padre Pio prayed in his own cell, with other Capuchin friars in the cells next door, and he managed to do this without disturbing their sleep, because he was discreet, low light, low voice, gentle. Fifth practical thing, don't give up in the first few days. The first week will be brutal. Your body will protest. You will feel tired during the day. You'll have doubts if it's worth it. And that's exactly where most give up. But if you get past the first week, your body starts to adapt. In the second week, it gets easier. In the third week, it becomes a habit. And in the fourth week, you can't imagine not doing it. Because the spiritual benefits will be so obvious that the sacrifice of sleep will seem small. And sixth practical thing, after praying, don't force yourself to go back to sleep immediately. Padre Pio stayed awake until 4 or 4:30 sometimes, meditating, in silence, letting the prayer reverberate in his soul. And then he slept another 2 or 3 hours before getting up for the day. You can do the same. Pray the complete prayer. Stay in silence for 15 minutes afterwards. And then go back to bed, knowing that you have fulfilled your duty. If you fall asleep again, great. If you don't fall asleep, also great, because that hour has already been consecrated, has already been transformed from the devil's hour into God's hour. There's a final story that I need to tell that Brother Albert d'Appolito wrote in his memoirs about Padre Pio. In the last week of Padre Pio's life, he was so weak that he could no longer get out of bed alone. The 5 holy wounds of Christ were bleeding intensely. The pain was unbearable. The Capuchin friars thought he was going to die at any moment. But even so, every dawn, he opened his eyes at 3 o'clock sharp. He tried to sit up, and when the friars ran to help and told him to rest, that he didn't need to pray in that condition, Padre Pio replied, "I do need to, because if I stop, who will watch over this hour?" He died on September 23rd, 1968. And on the dawn of the 23rd, for the last time, he woke up at 3. He made the sign of the cross and began to pray the prayer, but he couldn't finish. He lost consciousness in the middle. And at 3:30 a.m., surrounded by the friars, Padre Pio gave his soul to God, exactly at the hour that he had consecrated for 50 years, as if he had fulfilled his mission until the last second, as if he had remained on duty until the end. Brother Pellegrino, who was present at that moment, wrote in his memoirs something that few know. He said that at 3 in the morning, on the 23rd, when they entered Padre Pio's cell to check on him, they found him with his eyes open, fixed on the crucifix on the wall, and he was whispering something. Pellegrino came close to listen and recognized the words. It was the second part of the prayer, the renunciation. Padre Pio was renouncing the devil for the last time, declaring the victory of Christ for the last time. And when he finished that part, he closed his eyes, smiled slightly, and stopped breathing. The Capuchin friars were impressed with that smile, because it wasn't the smile of someone who was dying, it was the smile of someone who had won, of someone who had completed the mission. And years later, when Padre Pio's body was exhumed for the beatification process, they found him incorrupt, and on his face there was still a trace of that smile, as if his final victory on the dawn of the 23rd had been recorded even in his flesh. But there's another detail that the Vatican documented, and that confirms the power of this practice. In the 50 years that Padre Pio prayed at 3 in the morning, there was not a single documented case of demonic possession in San Giovanni Rotondo. Not one, in an era where possessions were relatively common in Italian villages, where exorcist priests had constant work. San Giovanni Rotondo was like an island of peace, and the exorcists of the region knew this. They sent difficult cases there, because they knew that Padre Pio's presence and his constant prayer created an atmosphere where the devil had a hard time operating. A priest and exorcist from Foggia, Father Francis Castelli, wrote something revealing in a 1954 report. He said that he tried to perform an exorcism in San Giovanni Rotondo, and the demon reacted differently, that it screamed things like, "I can't stay here, he burns me, he's always praying." And when Father Francis asked who he was, the demon replied, "The stigmatized one, the one who watches the hour that is mine, the one who stole my moment." This confirms something Padre Pio always said, that the prayer of a righteous man has immense power. That when you place yourself as an intercessor between God and the world, you become a shield, you become a barrier, and the devil needs to get through you to reach others. Padre Pio literally placed himself as a spiritual wall every single dawn, saying to hell, "If you want to attack during this hour, you will have to go through me first. And I am covered by the blood of Christ, protected by angels, consecrated to Mary, you shall not pass." And for 50 years, they did not pass. Not in San Giovanni Rotondo, not while Padre Pio was watching. And when he died, the friars feared that the protection would fall, that the attacks would return. But something surprising happened. Other friars began spontaneously to wake up at 3 a.m. They felt an irresistible calling, as if Padre Pio were passing the baton, and they began to pray the same prayer, keeping the vigil, maintaining the protection, and to this day, according to recent reports, there is always at least one Capuchin friar in San Giovanni Rotondo, awake at 3 a.m., praying Padre Pio's prayer. This created an unofficial tradition. It's not in the order's statutes, it's not a formal rule, but it's a practice maintained out of love and experience, because the friars who do this report the same peace that the friars of 50 years ago reported, the same sense of protection, the same invisible shield that descends upon the place. And this tradition began to spread to other convents, to monasteries, to religious communities around the world, always discreetly, always without fanfare, but always with the same results. Wherever Padre Pio's prayer is faithfully prayed at 3 a.m., the spiritual atmosphere changes, the attacks decrease, peace increases, and the devil retreats. An abbess in Portugal implemented this in her convent in 2005. She organized a schedule so that there would always be a nun in the chapel at 3 a.m., praying the prayer. And in 6 months, she wrote a letter to the bishop reporting dramatic changes. The younger sisters, who had difficulty with religious life, became stable. Those who were thinking of leaving the convent changed their minds. The temptations that afflicted the community decreased, and a case of apparent demonic oppression that was affecting one of the sisters resolved completely, without the need for a formal exorcism. The bishop asked for a detailed report. He wanted to understand what had changed. And when the abbess explained about the 3 a.m. practice, he remembered having read about it in the Vatican archives during his theological studies, and he confirmed that this was documented and approved, and he authorized the continuation of the practice. Today, if you ask any older Capuchin about the 3 a.m. prayer, He will know what you're talking about. He may not teach it immediately. He may ask questions first about your spiritual life, but he knows. And if he realizes that you are ready, that you understand the seriousness of it, he will pass you the prayer, because this is a spiritual weapon that cannot remain hidden when the world needs it, and the world needs it now, more than ever. Modern exorcists report a dramatic increase in cases, not only full possessions, but oppressions, infestations of houses, attacks on families. Father Gabriel Amorth, chief exorcist of Rome until 2016, said in an interview that nighttime attacks, especially at 3 a.m., had tripled since the 1990s, and he recommended exactly this practice, waking up at that hour, consecrating the moment, transforming the hour of attack into an hour of worship, because the devil operates by patterns. He's not creative. He doesn't innovate. He repeats the same strategies because they work, and 3 a.m. is an ancient strategy of his, tested for centuries. The hour when humans are most vulnerable, most sleepy, least spiritually alert, the perfect hour to whisper lies, to plant fears, to initiate oppressions. But when you wake up precisely at that hour, when you deliberately choose to watch over the moment that he considers his, you break the pattern, you interrupt the strategy, and you force him to retreat. Because he has no answer for genuine worship, no defense against conscious renunciation, no power against true consecration. Padre Pio understood spiritual warfare on a level that few saints have reached. Because he didn't just study about spiritual battle, he lived spiritual battle daily for 50 years, with documented physical attacks, with eyewitnesses, with visible marks on his body. So when he developed this prayer, it wasn't theory, it was a battlefield. It was a real test. It was a method proven through decades of direct combat, and now this method is available to you. Not because you are special, not because you are holy, but because you need it, because your family needs it, because your home needs it, and because Padre Pio, from heaven, continues interceding for all who face the same battles he faced, and he wants you to have the same weapons he used, so that you can have the same victories that he had. The friars recount that when Padre Pio died, the entire convent fell into a supernatural silence. It wasn't a sad silence. It was a silence of deep peace, as if the presence that they felt every dawn when Padre Pio prayed had descended one last time, more intense than ever, as if heaven were confirming. This man was faithful. This man watched over the darkest hour for 50 years, and now he rests in eternal light. So when you wake up at 3 a.m. from now on, when you pray this prayer, remember that you are entering into a 50-year tradition, that you are doing what Padre Pio did, that you are watching over the hour that needs to be watched, and that you are not alone, because Padre Pio still intercedes, still protects, still guards those who guard that hour, and the protection that he established continues operating through all who continue his practice. Now tell me in the comments, do you ever wake up at 3 a.m.? If so, what is the first thing you feel when that happens? Fear, peace, feeling the urge to pray, or just the overwhelming desire to drift back to sleep? Now that you know what Padre Pio of Pietrelcina was doing, are you willing to transform that hour of terror into an hour of adoration? Let us know in the comments. Because when you share your experiences, you strengthen others who are going through the same spiritual warfare. And together, watching and praying during the devil's hour, we become a spiritual army that the kingdom of darkness cannot defeat. We stand together, protected by faith and prayer. Join us, and let your voice be heard in this divine battle against the shadows.